What would we do without the Queen?
I don't know.
We'd be in deep trouble.
Are you sure the bell has rung? See, the little hand is right at 12 right now. Oh, she's ready.
You ready? Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Spokane County Planning Commission. Today is Thursday, June the 13th, and it's 9 a.m. First order of announcements. The public may participate in person or remotely by utilizing our web link, and telephone conference links, *9 to raise hands and *6 to speak. Individuals are limited to 1 3-minute comment period for any item. Please keep your comments specific to the current agenda item. Chat is not supported. Let's go ahead and introduce our commission.
Wayne Brokaw.
Clyde Hossey.
Pete Rayner.
And Stephen Pohl. The first order of business is what we call the open forum. This is the part of our agenda where the public comments on any item not on the current agenda are invited to address the commission. And we are online and we have people in the audience. So if anybody would like to come to the commission and talk about things that are not on this agenda today, please come forward at this point.
So I just wondered if we have an agenda somewhere.
We'll wait until you get that. Go ahead. That side, I think, on it. Yeah. Did you want to speak? It's not on this agenda, right? Okay, great. That's exactly why we have this slot. Name and address. 3
minutes.
Ella will be the timekeeper.
Okay, thank you, Ella. Hi, everyone. I'm Hillary Pham. I am from the Spokane County Treasurer's Office. I just wanted to make an introduction. I occasionally get calls from seniors in regarding to their properties and planning issues. So I just wanted to introduce myself, that you have a name and face to the Treasurer's Office, and as well as I get to know you and learn more about the Planning Commission. So that's all. Just a hello.
Well, that was quick. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
We were here to talk about the gun club, but I don't see it on here. It's not on there.
It's not on this agenda.
So this is the time. Yeah.
So if you'd like to speak, now would be the time.
Okay.
Name and address, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, the 3
So
minutes.
I'm Margaret Schweikart, and I live on Sunwest Avenue. So about a mile from where the proposed gun club is. And I'm going to play an audio, and it does have gunshots in it, but just want you to know. Turn the volume up. So from what I've heard from our neighborhood association, there's supposed to be the gun club is being proposed for our area. And that gun club is supposed to have shots every 1 minute is what's been in the report, or one every second, which is about what this is. And like I said, we live about a mile from there. And there's another gun shooting range, which it was the county, and it's now, I think, corrections. And we can hear that periodically at our house. So and this is closer to us. We moved out there in '79. We've been there a long time. We had moose in our backyard yesterday. It's a quiet neighborhood. You can hear the birds. I do not want to be hearing gunshots every second. Would you want to be living next to a gun range with shots going off? You're sitting on your back porch with your family and it's nice and quiet. And then there's this going on. They're expected to call in other gun clubs and have shooting ranges. We're also talking the trap that's going to be there. This is going to be going on all weekend and then 7 days a week. It's not something we want in our area. You've heard from a lot of our residents. You need to find a different place for it. There's a lot of houses out there. It's a quiet area. A lot of retired people are there. I think you need to do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dennis Schweikart, husband. As my wife said, we moved out there a long time ago. It's been a very popular place for Fairchild military personnel to retire to. They try to arrange their last station to be at Fairchild so they can retire. There is a lot of senior citizens. We know our neighbors all around us, you know, it's not a rural area. We have 3.5 acres. It's not a big, you know, there's houses right next door, dogs, cats, it's wildlife. Why put a huge gun club this close to all of these houses? There are like 200 of them, as I understand, within a mile of this. There are other gun clubs farther west that are rural, farm area. I mean, we're talking, I know there's one that, you know, when I was with the Boy Scouts, we would take the Boy Scouts out there and they did birding, and there would be shotguns to teach the dogs how to bird. That's a good another 10 miles west of us, which is rural. You don't have to go to Seattle to find enough property to put a gun club up. So dropping it right next to a cemetery, dropping it right next to all of the residential neighborhoods, they've got subdeveloped, they're building more houses out there. This isn't the place to do something like this. And so, you know, I sometimes feel like West Plains, and particularly our area at SunWest Avenue, has been the dumping ground, to be honest with you. We've been here a couple of times. There was a petition to change the zoning ordinance to put a classic car lot in, a junkyard. And it was going to have a great fence. And you go out and look at it, and it's just a junkyard. It's just dilapidated, abandoned, and cars left in it. Nothing was ever done positive to affect the area there. The Graham dump put in 1/2 mile from our house. I mean, is our neighborhood the place the county wants to put everything that nobody wants anywhere in their backyard? If you lived there, I can tell you, you wouldn't be happy about it either. So that's, I think, all I really want to say is that a lot of retired people, we do have some, you know, as the retired people get older and pass away, we do see some younger ones with kids coming in. Do you want the school, and the school buses come right in front of our house every morning at 8:30. Is this something, everything at 2:30, 3 o'clock when they drop the kids, you want them to come home and hear the gunfire going on constantly? I don't think so. You know, and as the seniors pass away, there will be more kids coming in and moving in. But with the gun club going that often, and it's not like it's just a hobby. This is now a commercial venture. To change the rules just to benefit this gun club at the detriment of all of us who live there and have lived our lives there, where's the priority on this? Where's the heart on this? So I beg you, consider more than just the economic benefit. Consider the impact on all the people who've lived their lives there. At some point, they're going to end up retiring, selling their homes. What's the home value going to be? Who's going to want to pay the kind of money? With the interest rates now being at 7% or more, these people got their homes at 2%. It's not economically viable for them to just up and move. I know, like 9 seconds, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your passion. I didn't see you read any notes. You just said that right off the top of your head.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, while we typically don't respond to open mic comments per se, I do want to remind the commission that the site on the West Plains that was purchased by the gun club for its operation cannot be used for gun club operation by court order. This commission has no decision in that regard, and that site is totally off the table for a future gun club. The gun club must look for another site, and the concerns of these neighbors notwithstanding, just wanted to remind you that that site is prohibited by court order from being used as a gun club. It will not be a gun club.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the commission for items that are not on this agenda? Anyone have their hand up? Very important. We always consult with the screen. No one? No one else in the audience? Okay, we will move on. Oh, yes. Our new latecomers here introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Melissa.
Melissa Whitstruck. I apologize for my late arrival.
A little louder. Melissa Wilstruck. Yeah.
Melissa Whitstruck. I apologize for my late arrival.
Okay, right.
For everybody that was here on time. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Logan Camporelli, likewise. Sorry to be late.
Great. Great to have everybody here. Terrific. Lonnie is out with the surgery. Is that what I heard? Oh, okay.
Surgery?
Yeah, it's got some sort of.
So young.
Well, right.
We get
There you go. All right, so public hearing, let's open the public hearing for the Farm and Ag Conservation Act file FAC 01-24 and the parcels as noted. Owner Loretta G. Magnuson. Robert Brock, lead us off.
Let's try this. Well, good morning, commissioners. As mentioned before, I'm Robert Brock, representing the Department of Building and Planning. And today we are here to rehear a proposal that was brought before you, I think back in February. And we're calling it the revised version of FAC 0124. And what happened was the applicant in this particular case, Ms. Magnuson, see if we can show you the parcel, originally just, does this have a laser pointer in it? Oh, okay. So the applicant originally proposed the 9004 parcel, and they asked for it to be in the Farm and Ag Conservation Program. Inadvertently, they forgot about their other 80 acres that was adjacent, the 9002 parcel. And so we, I got a call from Miss Magnuson saying that she had to pay the property taxes on the 9002 parcel. And she had to pay back taxes because it was in ag, and she was, she's retired over 80 years old, and she was a little distressed about that. And she said, I don't know why I had to pay the taxes. I tried to put it in this program. And I go, well, Loretta, your application doesn't have that parcel number in it. And I don't remember talking to you about it. And so we had some contact with the assessor's office and with the treasurer's office, and we ended up getting a refund in process for her. So that's good news. And then the discussion with the assessor's office, we came to the conclusion that the proper thing to do was to rerun this application back before you folks who serve as the Public Benefit Rating Board and take it through the process again. And so that's what we're here to do today. And so just to give you a general idea, this is located on the West Plains, sort of the corner of Hallett and Spotted Road. And the parcels we're looking at, of course, outlined in red and black, and at the top of the map is always north. And so the zoning in this particular case is urban reserve. And we're looking at 160 acres for the two parcels combined. Let's there we go. This is, oh, went back. Clicker. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here's an air photo of the site. Both of the parcels are currently vacant. Both of them are impacted slightly by wetlands, and we did an appropriate point reduction for that, calling it an impediment to farming when we did an analysis. So when we looked at this, we take these things through a public benefit rating form, and we look at them. And first of all, they have to meet a basic eligibility factor, and that was they either have to be in the agricultural program or there has to be some evidence that they were farmed in the past. And both of these parcels meet the basic eligibility because they were in the farm and ag program. We looked at this for a priority consideration. And what we have is an applicant indicating that they are too old to actively farm the property. And they are proposing that they will keep it in a farm-ready condition for the next available or the next owner so they can farm it. And Miss Magnuson has indicated that she would actually like a family member to take over and use these parcels for agricultural purposes. We look at additional considerations, and we find that the land is zoned urban reserve, which it's a rural designation and it allows agricultural uses. It's located outside of the urban growth boundary, and the applicant has developed a noxious weed and pest control strategy for the property. And as far as I mentioned earlier, there are some impediments to farming on this. You can see the whitish areas on the screen here. Those are telltale indicators that there's standing water on the property occasionally. So I think we looked at this, and the parcel 9004 had approximately 10% of its site that was covered by a wetland, and parcel 9002 had approximately 38% of its parcel covered by a wetland. And you can tell they're probably low-grade wetlands because you can't actually see standing water on there. You can just see evidence that there is water there occasionally. And so our critical area ordinance gives deference to active agricultural uses. And so it is somewhat of an impediment, but we took a deduction on the public benefit rating form on this one for that. And so when we reviewed the form and against all the established criteria, we came up with a score of 160 points, which is adequate to get this applicant a 50% tax deferral on the property. And so with these types of projects, it's a deferral, it's not an outright forgiveness. And so when the property is sold or converted to a different use, the treasurer's office will bill them for 7 years of back taxes, and they'll have to pay that when it's transferred to a different use, or if it goes into the full ag program, then it'll be eligible for a different sort of tax deferral. So I think that concludes our analysis. We are recommending one condition, and it's the standard condition that this applicant produce a report by January 31st of each year, indicating what they've done to maintain this land in a farm-ready condition. So with that, I will take any questions you might have in this particular application.
Mr. Brock, how long has it been since this was actively in an agricultural use?
Well, apparently it was in the ag program up until just this year. And I think they have to demonstrate that they're making income on the property. And so I'm not sure if she was audited or not. I don't think I got the note that she was audited, but at some point the assessor's office checks with the parcel owners and says, are you producing any agricultural income on this? Demonstrate that. And I think in the full ag program, you have to do it 3 out of every 5 years. So I don't have a specific date for you, but.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And are you saying the wetlands have never been delineated? They look.
Well, they haven't been
might
delineated
be
by a
seasonal.
qualified professional. They show up on the county's GIS maps as wetlands. Yeah.
So they might be seasonal or intermittent, but
yeah, they're
we don't
probably,
have a
I mean,
delineation.
having a lot of experience looking at air photos and our critical area ordinance, I would say that you're probably looking at intermittent wetlands there. You can see a more permanent wetland a little bit to the north where you can actually see water there. And right here, you just see the telltale signs that there may be water on the site during certain periods of the year. And that's typical on the West Plains.
Very typical. On
Doesn't drain well at all.
No, no. Blue basalt is very tough to get through. So thank you. I appreciate that.
More comments? Okay. How would we phrase this, Scott?
It's a public hearing. You need to ask if anybody from the public wants to comment.
Floor is open for anyone who'd like to come forward. I don't see any yellow slips, but anybody online? Do we see? No? Okay. Seeing none. Should we close the public hearing and vote on it and then open it for the next one?
Yes.
Like, so order public hearings closed on this matter. And the phrasing for this conversion was
Suggested motion would be that the planning commission recommend to the Board of County Commissioners approval of this request.
do I hear a motion? So moved by Pete Rayner. Second by Clyde Hazy. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the vote signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, I say nay. That motion carries. I'd like to open a public hearing for Farm and Ag Conservation File FAC 02-24 in the parcels. As indicated, the owner of Personal Asset Trust for Gina Baker Osterbach, Personal Asset Trust for Sonia Baker Vanderbrake, the parcel was noted Tammy D. Bouchard and Robert J. Compton. Hope I said all that right. Robert? There we go.
Okay, so this proposal is being brought forth by a group of family members. It's located in the northern portion of the county, a little bit east of Highway 2. The parcels are located in 3 distinct clusters, each with 2 parcels each. And you identified the owners in this case. Gina Baker Osterbeck and Sonia Baker Vanderbrake own 7 of the parcels, with one of the parcels owned by Bouchard and Coglington. So the property owners are requesting a change from farm and ag conservation to, farm and agricultural land to farm and ag conservation. We've got 6 parcels totaling at approximately 194 acres. The applicants are indicating that the parcels involved were part of a larger farm that was farmed by their family members for generations, and they can trace their ancestors' presence on this property back to when it was homesteaded in 1891. The separated parcels were used to grow alfalfa, raising cattle, chicken, pigs, with some smaller scale milk and egg productions. The current owners of the property are descendants of the original family, and they recently inherited the land themselves and are themselves too old to actively farm it. They propose to keep the land in a farm-ready condition so that the next owners will have the opportunity to do an agricultural use on it. So what I'll do is I'll go through the 3 different clusters of parcels. So right here, we've got 2 parcels, 372.32.9006 and 372.32.9013, located adjacent to Highway 2, north of Colbert Road right there. The zoning on these is rural conservation on the northern parcel and let's see, RAC, which is Rural Activity Center on the southern parcel. Let's switch to an air photo here, and we can see what's going on there. Each of these parcels has a dwelling on it and several outbuildings. And you can see there's a creek that sort of meanders through the property. Let's go to the second cluster of parcels here. We actually have 2 parcels here. It's difficult to see, but in the lower right-hand corner, there's a triangle parcel there. And so I'll just identify these by the last 4 digits. The 90 90018 parcel and the 9003 parcel. They're located adjacent to Madison Road, about 0.4 of a mile north of its intersection with Black Road. This is Madison Road running north-south here. Here's Black Road coming in east-west. Let's switch to an air photo here. You see this property is substantially forested. There is no structures on the 9003 parcel, but on the 9018 parcel, there is several outbuildings are located there. This is approximately 81 acres. And I neglected to mention that the first group of parcels was approximately 22 acres in size. Let's go to the third group of parcels. Now, the one that is that's not owned by the sisters is this parcel, the 9048 parcel, owned by Bouchard and Coddington. This cluster here is approximately 91 acres, and it's generally located south of the intersection of Woolard Road and Hardesty Road, which is off the map, but to the north, and this map is oriented with north at the top. Let's switch to an air photo here. This particular one. So the 9062 parcel to the south has no structures on it, while the 9048 has a dwelling, a manufactured home, and several outbuildings. And this is one of the structures on the 9048 parcel. Sorry, this photo's not doing it justice, but it's kind of an interesting side note here that this barn, sort of an interesting example of rural architecture, was built in 1942 from remnants of an old dance hall, which used to be on the corner of the property. And the applicant told me that at that time, the war was going on and you couldn't get brand new lumber to construct items. And so they had to basically recycle. And so that's how this was built. And it's kind of interesting because it actually has 3 floors to it. It actually kind of has a walkout basement in the bottom, which is kind of unique for barns. So I don't think it's on the historic register, but definitely a interesting old structure there. So,
Mr. Chairman, you should maybe suggest that Logan, in his day job, takes a look at this. This would be an interesting candidate for preservation.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool building. I've never seen it or heard the story. Super cool.
Yeah. So the department took a look at this and its public benefit rating form, and we looked at it for basic eligibility, and we found that all the parcels were either currently in the agricultural program or had historically been used for agriculture. As far as priority consideration, we have applicants that are indicating they are too old to actively farm the land, but they are willing to keep it in a farm-ready condition so that the next owner can resume agricultural activities. And we see that the current use of the land appears to be consistent with future agricultural activities. For additional consideration, all the land is found in rural zoning designation, which allows agricultural activity. It's located outside of the urban growth area, and we find that the applicant has proposed a plan to control noxious weeds. We did find a slight impediment on the property, and we correspondingly downgraded it on the public benefit rating form. And that is that, if I can go backwards here, that there is a stream that bisects the property. And it's the same stream that bisects both. There's 2 different clusters of property that the exact same stream bisects. But again, I will say that the critical areas ordinance is deferential to agricultural pursuits that have been going on prior to its initiation. And so we did downgrade it a little bit, but you can still do agricultural uses on it. So in summary, we have 194 acres here consisting of 6 parcels that wish to change tax categories. We are proposing a standard condition, which is that they produce a report once a year by January 31st and give it to the assessor to indicate how they are maintaining the property in a farm-ready condition, including the noxious weed control strategy. So with that, I'm concluding my presentation and open to questions on this proposal.
Thank you, Robert.
I have a question for clarity, and I've been trying to follow you. Are they all adjacent to each other? You never indicated that, or you did? I mean.
Oh, no, they're in 3 distinct clusters. They're all in the general area in the North County, sort of east of Highway 2, but there are 3 clusters of 2 parcels. Yeah.
And you brought them together to say that it's 191 acres total?
Yeah.
Is it because, and why was that? I mean, I'm not following you. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's allowed by the by this ordinance. We have it's allowed to run this as one application because it's a group of, it's a family group and they all own the parcels together. And it was a traditional farmstead, and that's not uncommon that farmsteads have separated parcels. Yeah, they didn't own all of the land in between, but at any one point, but they just had separate different operations going on in the same general geographic area.
So just to make sure, they're not contiguous.
No, they're not. They're not all contiguous. There's 2 parcels in each of the clusters that are contiguous.
And
I can go back through them real quick if you.
no, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that point.
I should have given you an overall map that showed the whole area and go, here they are.
No, that was the important thing to me, is that they were not contiguous, or they were. So that's great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Do we know, and maybe the planning department doesn't do this, the value of the tax deferral over 7 years? I mean, that's kind of important. I think I've asked in the past, what is the total acreage that the county has in this program? Yeah. But for this one, and maybe that's not part of the work that's done on the application.
Mr. Chairman, we in the planning department generally does not track these. We are part of this process because you, as the planning commission, serve as the evaluation board by our own code. It's sort of an incidental route for planning. There's not really a planning discussion in this. It's purely a tax issue that revolves to the assessor, but it falls to you as representatives of the public to act as that board. And in some cases, maybe we should adjourn the planning commission meeting, reconvene as the other board, do that, adjourn, come back as a planning commission. We just thought it was simpler to run them through as an agenda item. So it's a totally separate function from the rest of our department.
As I assumed, I'm just kind of like keeping this in the back of my mind for the planning department. Eventually, the tax-paying public has to pay for infrastructure and improvements and things like that. Although a competing interest is the preservation of ag land. So I just think that that's part of maybe for the comp plan update to think about. What's the acreage that we have that is not in tax?
I thought I remember Bob telling us that last time we had this discussion, and I don't remember for sure, but I remember it being a very small amount of acres comparatively, but that's just my memory.
Oh yeah, we did have a presentation on the amount of acreage, and we went through each of the different categories. Yeah, I can email that to you if you're interested. Essentially, if I can continue, essentially what happens is the deferral is on the land. So any structures that are on the property are taxed at the full market value, and it's just a deferral on the value of the land. And there is a recapture provision in this. They go back 7 years. If this, let's say the 9062 parcel was sold and somebody came in and they go, well, your zoning code allows us to divide that into 10s. And they did that. And none of those folks wanted to do any agricultural use. then there'd be 7 years of back taxes that would be due on that particular property at the time of sale. Yeah. And so there's a recapture provision. It's just if you do it long enough, those years fall off at the end. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I have another question is that as the years go on, progress is made in different areas and different neighborhoods. And I have no idea how far apart these parcels are of each other. I would rather approve each one individually in case something happens. I mean, I don't like a blanketing effect because it doesn't affect it in the same way. I'd rather do, if there's two together, then we'll do those two together. If there's two over there, we'll do those two together. Is that unreasonable or not? I don't know.
Well, to address your concern there, what happens is they can individually come out of the program. So they're going in as a group, and each owner is essentially responsible for producing those reports and for maintaining the property in a farm-ready condition. And so individually, let's say the 9048 parcel, the one that was owned by the outside of the sister group, if they made a rural wrecking yard out of the place, and it's like, okay, that's a code violation and it doesn't look like it's ag ready anymore, they could be removed from the program without the other parcels being affected. So the assessor's office has the ability to pick different parcels where conditions have changed and remove them from the program.
You kind of did not answer my question.
Okay, there's also
let me jump in.
Please.
Let me jump in.
Okay.
The Spokane County Code allows them to be considered as one because they're under common ownership. So we don't necessarily have a choice. If they choose to use that as part of our code, it's allowed.
Thank you.
My question's about the parcel that has a bunch of timber on it. Does timberland, I think it was back a couple, or maybe just back one. Does timberland get a deduction, or how does that work? Yeah, this one.
Yeah, we went too far.
I
It
think
is possible for the applicant of this parcel to be in the timber program.
But does the timberland impact the ag usability? Like in this case, I think you said this was 90 acres, but are we considering that ag space that, looks like it's farmable here in the southeast corner, or are we providing it for the entire space? Like, I don't know anything about farming. Like, maybe you can cut those trees down and farm it all of this is considered farmland, or just the southwest quarter, or whatever that is?
At one point, it was all considered agricultural land, and what can happen on there is you can have grazing of cattle, and you could have the field as the production for cattle food, and then the cattle could graze on portions of it, and they could also be in the woods part of it too.
Cool, thank you. That's the kind of explanation I needed. Appreciate that.
Further comments? Comments from the audience? See no yellow slips online?
Nobody has their hand raised.
No further comments from the commission. Let's close the public testimony. So ordered.
Motion to recommend for approval FAC 0224. I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Second
from Pete. Discussion on that motion. Thank you, Logan.
I'll just say I think that Melissa wanted to see that again, but I feel like I remember you providing us a little presentation, and so maybe when time allows in our agenda, if you could give us that presentation again that just kind of lined out how much of this land is in the program versus how much total of this type of land is there. I would appreciate it, and I think Commissioner Woodstrick would too.
Thank you, Logan. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. You're a nay? No. Nay. One nay. So you recorded that? Okay, thank you. Next, I'd like to open a public hearing for 2024 reconsideration of the Growth Management Hearings Board remand of Comprehensive Plan Amendment 16-CPA-04. Applicant is J.R. Bond and Engineering with the parcels as noted. A proposal to change the comprehensive plan map and concurrent zone change from low density residential LDR to medium density MDR on 22.3 acres. Mr. Chesney.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. We are before you again, mostly as a due diligence step. This body recommended or affirmed its prior decision to recommend approval to the BOCC earlier in the year. The BOCC also affirmed its decision at the time. We learned after the fact that there was an omission in one of the analysis pieces that was pointing out that there were no geologic hazards on the site, and further investigation showed that there is a small part of the site that has erodible soils, which are considered geological hazards under the Growth Management Act. We went back and reanalyzed those areas and found that the condition did not warrant a change in our analysis, nor did it warrant a change in the SEPA mitigations. So we're bringing it back before you to further or to augment the record, recognize the fact that we did look back at geological hazards, and that information did not change planning staff's opinion to move this forward. Subsequently, there were comments from the public that related to traffic analysis, habitat use, and those geological hazards. And we said we had the applicant produce a full geologic hazards report, which was our basis for not changing our opinion. They also produced a habitat management plan to address the open space corridors and the trail system that goes through, and then did a traffic impact analysis, both of which are typically done at the building permit stage. The applicant did that at our request at this planning stage to provide answers for public comments that were related to those things. And nothing in the traffic impact analysis changed our assessment at this time. And the habitat management plan shows that they are adequately aware of possible wildlife corridors and that they will manage those more specifically as buildings are recommended. Finally, and most recently, the group FutureWise commented on this, or essentially reinforced their comments from last time. They do not feel this is a good place for multifamily housing. Their recommendation to you is to keep it as a low-density residential project, and they don't see the need of urgency to move this along in that fashion. To remind you, this is a 2016 amendment, which means it was filed in 2015. It has been in consideration for some time. There is clearly no sense of urgency on this. Their perspective is it should be better considered in the 26 plan. That's certainly an opinion that we would respect, but we also do not see any reason to hold it back given its progression so far. And as for the multifamily component, we simply professionally disagree with the assessment that it should not be multifamily. Multifamily is recommended in our comprehensive plan for infill projects in low density neighborhoods. So this by itself has that aspect of adding residential units in a single family neighborhood without adversely affecting the traffic patterns. And secondly, its proximity to Whitworth University does provide an employment center. It does provide another rationale for providing this kind of housing within walking distance of an employment center. So we disagree with the criticism that should remain single family development. So you've seen these before, and the point is that this remand has met the conditions that the Growth Management Hearing Board imposed on it in 2016 and now gone beyond that. And to be fair to FutureWise, they acknowledged that the 3 additional studies were valuable. They said that that was a desirable step to have taken. And they recognized
the county updating its capital facilities plan, which was one of the original reasons this was remanded. So they did, I guess, progressively compliment the county on taking those steps while they still disagreed with the ultimate process. So you've seen these comments before. We left this up here from before. Is that the CFP has been updated. This is the FutureWise recommendation that has been addressed. And so our recommendation for you is, again, to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners affirm their prior assessment of this amendment as passed by the resolution 18-0831. We are happy to take any questions or any additional public comment.
Mr. Chesney, can you go back one slide, please?
Certainly.
Oh, okay. So I was looking at weight restrictions on construction vehicles, and the response is that this falls under the purview of the Public Works Department. I get that. I understand that. I just would hope that there would be some comment available from Public Works, even though that's going to happen during the SEPA process, in order to consider a zone change from low density to medium density. This close to the comp plan update, that would be helpful for me as a commissioner.
Sure, and to be sure, Public Works has commented on this fairly extensively in the previous editions, and including both traffic and weight restrictions on construction vehicles is not something you do because it's a totally temporary issue, short of perhaps a construction vehicle building a wind tower that's bringing in 100,000-pound loads where you do have to rebuild a road to bring that in. Normal construction vehicles for residential development, we don't necessarily regulate that. The other aspect of this that was controversial or was concern on 5 Mile Road was a secondary access. This also preserves the original motion that requires a development agreement that limits development to 99 units until a second access is provided. The second access that was proposed on 5 Mile Road is to be used as an emergency access only, not as to provide that second access for future development. Those restrictions are still in place.
Thank you very much. I think that evacuation access is front and center on most people's minds, especially after the wildfire thing we had yesterday with Jimmy Spokane Road. So I think that that's appreciated, limiting, until they have that.
Correct.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chesney, you made an interesting comment that stuck in my mind. The proposal is for less density. And again, I look at what we're dealing with is the big picture for the neighborhood and the needs and so forth for housing. And yet the applicant is saying, well, I'll even downsize the amount of density. Is that in the right stream of our master plan? Or can we look at it that way? Because I'm trying to satisfy the housing needs.
Certainly. The original proposal was for approximately north of 300 and some units. Mm-hmm. That required, among other things, the second access point that could not be used for the choke point. The developer agreed to the 99 units using the single access in generally multifamily housing. If you were to take that land and plat it at our typical densities for LDR in its current zoning, it would be about 40 to 45 units, most likely. So while they downsize the project substantially to meet the criterions for access, it's also more than twice the units that could be provided if the zoning was kept as it is.
We're in need of land for housing, and that's the reason for my question. Mm-hmm. The big picture, that's what I'm looking at right now.
Yes. And to be sure, while this isn't necessarily a land planning analysis, it's a challenging site. It has slopes. It has a transmission line.
Those are not attributes that are generally found desirable by single family home builders that would want individual lots, 4,000 square foot lots or something. So if it was to be restricted to single family homes, it's very likely it would be hard to build that out in market rate housing. Whereas multifamily, being commercial construction, can better mitigate both the land conditions and the transmission tower conditions as well. So there's also the factor of what can the market actually build on the site.
Thank you.
It seems like yesterday we had this hearing.
Wasn't that long ago.
And I'm saying that because I drive by that multiple times a day. And I have a lot of friends who were pro and con. And if I recall, if we turned it down, we left in place the emergency access as a main access, coming right out halfway down a shadow covered 5 mile road as the primary access, and very unsafe to put. And then, as you said, the housing options available in medium density are so much more user friendly on a hillside than single family. I mean, we went through it. I thought it was a very creative resource. Anyways, I just want to remind the people that it's a challenging site.
It is, and the original second access was anticipated roughly here, very close to this boundary line, and that was or is an Avista Utilities access point to their substation facility that sits up in this area. Avista at the very beginning said, no, we will not agree to make that an open public access in any case. Then it was proposed over on this side, which is a much more severe slope. From the traffic perspective, our traffic folks were less concerned about that, but the slope itself made that somewhat of an untenable solution, at least at the time. So hence we're back to the current conditions do not allow access onto 5 Mile Road except as an emergency entrance only. And unless they can solve that issue, it'll be limited to the 99 units.
Am I correct saying that Waikiki, since this was to us, what date did it come to us the first time?
I don't recall, probably March.
2016 or 2015.
Yes.
Well,
but we considered it last year as well.
Well, that was my point.
Yes.
And there's been major road improvements done on Waikiki. Would that cause some changes in where we were going?
Our transportation staff did find that those improvements had at least a nominal nominal impact on being able to support the traffic. But the overall traffic was not seen as being unsustainable for Waikiki Road.
No, I'm ready for a motion, or I'm ready for public comment.
I just want to ask one question here. Am I correct in assuming that it is zoned for a residential use?
Yes, it's LDR now.
So what the proposal is we want more residential units there. And you're right, we're not making any more land, but there is land that is appropriately zoned for a higher density. There is no obligation to ensure that whatever you want to build, you can build it there in that location with steep slopes or whatever it is. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, so what's the appropriate balance here? Is this the right place for that type of a more intense development? Not only considering what the needs are now, I'm not denying that we need more housing. Is this the right place to make that happen, given that there's not appropriate emergency egress to the property? So I'm just like, we need to think about this in light of the fact that we've got an update to the entire county plan coming up.
Yes, although I would offer that because this is separate, we're not considering it as part of the 26 update. We're considering it in this context. Our job as planners is to bring to you the criteria by which it is eligible to be considered as an amendment. The analysis from both our staff, transportation staff, outside agencies has suggested that it meets their criteria with these mitigations, including the limited access. The fire access and others feel that the 99 units is a safe maximum for single access, but not any more than that. So it it clears all of those procedural and planning hurdles or parameters to present to you for a decision on public policy. It is, of course, your decision as to whether you agree with the conclusions that have been presented to you, or you wish to look at it in a different perspective.
I just say we voted 5-0 in October to approve this. Nobody voted against it. Nothing changed. They just did more studies that didn't reveal any significant additional issues. It seems like this is something we need to move forward with.
I'm concerned about cumulative impacts, which is something that has to be considered in any SEPA. And that's down the road. I agree. Sorry, no pun intended.
Although in trying to remember when everybody rejoined the board, when this was considered in its full first remand context, it was also put into the cumulative impact analysis at the end of that series. I think it was the 2023 amendments. Put into that sequence as part of that cumulative impact for those amendments at that time. So it wasn't treated as an outlier from that point. It was put back into the actual cycle at that particular time.
I want to comment on the response we got from FutureWise. My concern with acknowledging their argument is that it becomes a foundation to push everything to the next comp plan amendment process. I mean, we've spent years developing a comp plan amendment process to deal with these kinds of issues, and to suddenly say, well, we're only 2 years away from a GMA, we should push it to then. I mean, that argument could be used against anything we ever decide in the interim. It just seems to me, and it just seems that's a bad precedent to base it on the fact that, well, let's just defer it. Let's kick the can down the road for 2 years. And I think those kinds of thought processes are part of why we have a housing crisis and why housing is so expensive, and we need to get out of our own way.
Further comments from the commission? Public testimony is available. Should the applicant be asked to speak? Well, Bonnet and the people who were named in here. They're right over here. Did you want to take this? And I mean, you're the central person, and okay. We do have a public testimony here from Brooke Frickleton with FutureWise. Would you come up and speak, please? Thank you. Thanks for being here. Did I say that right, Frickleton? Okay, good.
So as he stated, I'm Brooke Frickleton. I'm here on behalf of FutureWise. I'm their deputy legal director.
We normally have our addresses and everything.
I've got it there on the card, but I'm happy to.
1208 East 39th Avenue. Okay, 99200. Great, thank
you. Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity to comment today on the comprehensive plan amendment number 1604. As stated, I'm here on behalf of FutureWise, which is, as some of you know, is a nonprofit organization that works throughout the state to support land use policies that encourage sustainable communities. I appreciate the planning staff kind of acknowledging some of our comments. We have taken additional review at the studies that were submitted and do acknowledge and appreciate those, that further analysis, as well as the recent adoption of a GMA compliant capital facilities plan. However, I do want to draw to your attention that with the mandated 2026 periodic update process coming, it is possible that that capital facilities plan will no longer meet the revised GMA requirements, in particular the new requirement with climate change and resiliency. And FutureWise believes that the 2026 periodic update is the proper opportunity to implement more comprehensive land use and transportation strategies that comply with the revised GMA requirements. To acknowledge the concerns about slippery slope, that is within the commission's control. Our focus here is to look at each individual parcel with its cumulative impacts. I do not believe that this opens a slippery slope or floodgates, no pun intended, to are us challenging each item and encouraging that it be pushed into the 2026 update. That is not our intent, but our intent is to ensure that these decisions are made at a holistic process with full consideration of the long-term impacts as indicated by members of the commission. The current transit options identified in the September 2023 staff report, we believe are insufficient to properly serve this proposed development. While there have been updates to the roads and the traffic nearby, and additions to the bus service in that area, that bus service it's only a commuter route and it does not actually serve the nearby commercial centers referenced in the staff report. Therefore, we think alternative locations for the infill development and multifamily housing are preferred, that are less close to the urban growth boundary, less close to areas that are potentially more prone to wildfires. And in addition, while the capital facilities plans does indicate that Meade school districts shared that they have adequate capacity at this time, they are concerned about future growth and express concerns about that growth. And the capital facilities plan, the 2023 plan, only offers limited information about that. So in conclusion, we recommend repealing this comprehensive plan amendment and considering it with a 2026 periodic update. And in the alternative, we recommend that we recommend the Planning Commission adopt a low density residential zone for this parcel. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have their hands raised? I thought we had 4 up there. Now there's only 2. Okay. Anyone else didn't get a chance to talk on public testimony?
Our ratings are suffering, Mr. Chairman. We're not exciting enough to keep our audience engaged.
I'm sorry to hear that. We need a better marketing team. Anything from you? More comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, we're
ready to close public testimony on this. Without objection, so ordered. Discussion amongst the commission, or we will obtain a motion to move forward with this. State the motion, how it should be logically constructed. Scott, would you please? It's up there on the screen.
You have one right there.
Move to recommend. Okay. Board of County Commission affirm the earlier amendment CPA-04-16 is passed in resolution 18-0831. That is the recommendation. The motion.
I spent a lot of time thinking about these last year.
Yeah.
Dove deep on each one. It doesn't seem like things have changed in a germane way to me here. And so I'll make the motion to recommend the BOCC affirm the earlier amendment of CPA 04-16 as previously passed in resolution 18.0831.
Thank you, Logan.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Glenn. Discussion amongst the commission.
Yeah, if I could just a little bit more, I will address some future-wise comments too that I find to be a little bit strange. There was some address by the future-wise speaker that there's limited transit options, but I mean, there's a commuter line that goes directly down this road, like in front of the site. It provides access to downtown. Yes, it's an express commuter route, but there's also less than a half-mile away, which is a typical walk shed. There's the access to the 28 route on Whitworth's campus, which also allows you to walk across the campus, so not even having to walk on a busy road, which would provide you access to commercial centers nearby. Additionally, it's really within a 1 mile walk of a commercial center, which is also a pretty typical walk shed. I don't remember Meade having any specific issues about, like I said, they said they're concerned about the future, but we're just talking about 99 units here, potentially 50 more than would be allowed under the current zoning. I don't see anything that's changed, and we should support this.
Thank you. More comments?
Well, I appreciate your comments, Logan. And thank you for all the work that you've done reviewing this and for staff's work reviewing this. And it is coming back several times over many years. I think it's important to keep in mind that although it sounds like or seems to that some things are getting pushed off to 2026, it's important to remember that just as my driver's license photo does not look like me 5 years ago, neither does the current comp plan that's being operated under or the capital facilities plan. The planning department works with the information they have at the time, but it's dynamic, it changes, it moves, and we've all seen that happen in the last 3 or 4 years. It's like this. It's very fast that things are changing in Spokane County. So I think it's important to take the time to relook at things that we decided, yeah, that's fine, sounds good. It's only, 50 more units than it was, but those are 2.3 people per household. I don't even know if that's the right amount anymore. All ages, all abilities. We just need to look at it and go and give it the deference that it's due for each decision. It's not that I feel like opposing that. I just feel like the context is really important. These are not individual decisions. They cascade, if you will. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Further comments? Are we ready for the vote? First, wait ahead. Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay. Carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, commissioners. We appreciate your patience and diligence on this issue. It has been out there quite a while.
I was there on the first round, and maybe Pete and I were the only ones. And it was a long.
We had a full house.
It was huge.
Yeah, and I had several conversations with neighbors, and when they found out we were closing that temporary, all of a sudden my gosh, yeah. So anyway, this has been well vetted, and I'm glad we keep it moving.
This is, I guess, before you, as a Peterson's, back the prior Planning Commission director.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Next order of business is a workshop.
It is.
Preliminary housing allocations by income groups, presentations, discussion of the additional PTAC work on possible housing allocation by income groups to the individual jurisdictions within Spokane County. And more.
Mr. Chairman, this is a chance to preview for you some of the information we're going to be discussing with our Board of Commissioners on Monday in their standing session. They have seen this early. They asked us to come back with some more detail. It has been quite extensively worked on by the the Planning Technical Advisory Committee, the PTAC group, recommending to the steering committee. The steering committee has had one initial preview of what we're going to show with you. And so today we're looking at essentially how, and this is a difference from GMA, FutureWise alluded to things like the capital facilities plan maybe not being adequate for 26. We're completely aware of the new elements that are being required in climate resiliency, and particularly this in housing, and housing being allocated by income groups across the board. While not to make light of anything, given the county's past, we are not about to put forward a CFP that is not in compliance in 26. We have been down that road before, and it did not turn out well for anyone. So all of the capital facilities work, all of the work that's going into this is intended to produce a GMA compliant plan in 26. And we're working with Commerce and frankly, FutureWise on commenting early and often on these aspects. So we intend to use that analysis and criticism as constructive in moving these forward. This is one of those big changes, though. Housing in the past was done almost solely as a function of land use and zoning density. and available use. And if we don't have enough, we keep pushing out. Now we're being tasked with allocating housing by income groups in a fair share to the various communities that plan under GMA, which is pretty much all of our cities and towns, our small towns, and of course the metro core and the county itself. That's a new thing. And what you can see is some of the language on where we're going with that, but let's get to kind of the numbers here. What's being used as a basis for this is a tool created by the Department of Commerce that allocates these houses by income level based on two options. One is on your overall, essentially, share of growth in or share of the population, and then a second one that looks at where you're going to be in 2026. What we're doing differently this year is these allocations, and I probably should have left that other slide up, are being done in the sense that what that means is each individual city, town, county has to have accommodating development regulations to allow and support housing at that level to be built in those areas. This is not a housing construction plan. This is a development regulation plan to put in place development regulation zoning that allows and fosters that sort of housing. There are really two methods that Commerce has put forward, and then at the moment they've left open the door for a method C, which is indeterminate. It's and not to be too insolent about it, but it's anything you can come up with that you can defend, and that leaves a lot of room open. So we're also looking at where we're going. Method A looks at projected growth. You can see here if that means your place is going to grow by 4%, you're being allocated 4% of those individual areas. B looks at where you're going to be in 2046. So if the place is going to grow by as much as 5%, you're going to get allocated 5% of that growth regardless of the share of population you have in the county. This is obviously hard to see, and we've got a summary coming up in a minute, but what it shows is that first allocation by each of the communities and the county, including the unincorporated county, with the estimated housing supply from the 2020 census, and then the allocation of additional supply over time. And you can, in that total column, you can see the countywide housing supply of 222,000 units, needing an additional 75,000 units in this period to handle all housing allocations. And it's broken down by the individual communities as you go down the spreadsheet. What you can also see, well, let me get to a companion. But basically, if you look at the unincorporated Spokane County line across the top, it gives us 20 or 35% of the county's population growth, and that leads to the housing units being broken down, for example, in that 30 to 50% median income, almost 5,000 units being allocated to the county, in the 50 to 80%, 3,000 units being allocated to the county. And those numbers are here and here. If we went to the method B that's being proposed, the share allocated to the unincorporated Spokane County, which is essentially the UGAs as they're known now. This does not anticipate any UGA boundary changes. Those numbers in the 30 to 50% AMI jump up to 8,000 units, and in the 50 to 80% to 14,000 units. So this alternate method assigns a much higher share of those to the unincorporated county. What our staff, particularly Bongo and Tate, have been shepherding this with the PMT. They have generally reached something of a consensus that method A is the preferred starting point. And I say something, I mean, consensus is not a unanimous decision. We know, for example, Airway Heights does not agree with method A. We have heard more recently that the city is now reconsidering its support for Method A, City of Spokane. So there's a lot of work to be done in how these are going to be put forward. We put up in a comparison the A and B for the three big jurisdictions. And you can see those comparisons in the county numbers here from 5 to 8,000, from 3 to 14,000. And in the city, how they actually in that Method B end up with a negative number. The negative number is a little misleading. In the pure math, it shows essentially that the city has, for example, 7,300 more units than required for that 80%, 50 to 80% income level. Other counties, Snohomish County, when they've used this Method B or an alternative, simply zeroed those out because you can't take away units. It's a nonsensical number. But it gives you a sense of how those differences are being portrayed.
Scott, maybe I missed this, but could you just tell me a little bit of Method A and Method B? What are they generated at? How come we have these two methods? Just help me understand.
Sure. I'm gonna ask our guys to come up and give you the details. They have been shepherding this, and they have it they've been doing all the research.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Can you restate your question, please?
Yeah, where did Method A come from? Why was that a starting point? And then what was the genesis of Method B? Just trying to understand how you end up with these two places and not some other place entirely.
Okay, where did they come from? I guess I can answer the question on the consensus on Method A, and then Tate might be able to help me on where they came from a little bit. So I think the biggest concern I've heard about Method B from fellow planners is those negative numbers. So, the city of Spokane, for example, having, negative 7,000 units in 50 to 80% is, as Scott said, somewhat nonsensical. And it results in, for example, the county picking up kind of just phantom units because we're not taking them away and just moving them elsewhere. So it kind of creates these weird kind of mirages in the data that are hard to parse and to plan for. So I think the concern about that was probably one of the larger reasons as to how the reason we wanted to use Method A as a starting point. Do you mean in terms of how they arrive at the numbers?
Or just like, yeah, what is, I guess it sounds like maybe Commerce directed these two methods. Just like, where did that's where they come from. Commerce said, here's the methods, choose one of these methods or come up with your own method. Is that sort of the options?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That helps me.
Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay.
And so the steering committee of officials has been chewing on the planning group for the steering committee of officials has been chewing on these two methods basically and trying to figure out what makes sense.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We've been many discussions on both. To read add a bit more detail, Method C means any changes to A or B. So any sort of things that want to be addressed specifically by SCEO as we move forward is something we at PTech look at for any changes to maybe address those within both methods. So it doesn't mean we have to come up with like all our new math equations and back it up. It could just mean what factors do we want to add into these, like a weighted distribution of some kind, and then explain and be able to back that up.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's Method A or B. If you want to modify Method A or B, you can make that Method C. You just have to justify why you're choosing to do that. Thanks.
Correct.
That helps me a lot.
And it's not in this presentation, but the Department of Commerce is working on an update to Method A, which is going to add some distinguishing factors. Specifically, it's going to, it breaks down UGAs by specific UGAs. So currently, if you look at this unincorporated county, our jurisdiction is just one growth sort of blob, whereas the updated tool will break it up into individual unincorporated UGAs. So we could technically assign growth to, let's say, the North Metro specifically. Very early on the draft version of that, we sort of got an inside look very early on with Commerce and walked through it. But in terms of the bugginess of it, it's still being worked on by them. But in terms of conceptually, it's something that we have access to and are discussing with PTAC as well. So that is another alternative we'll probably have discussion about in the future.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions there. So I think everybody in the room understands that the 2020 census had some issues. Let's just how to put it nicely. But whatever method is chosen, doesn't it have to be financially defensible? Can you provide for wherever you allocate these populations to develop?
Yes, is the very simple answer. This is one step in a chess game, so to speak. There's the individual cities are working on their land capacity analysis. In the past, we also call a land quantity analysis to show what they have left over from their current boundaries and their current UGAs that are generally in the joint planning realm. How much developable land do they have? What's the capacity they can handle? So there's that geometry and mathematical exercise. We're also taking the OFM population projections for 2046, which were given to us in using the 22 numbers, but 2046 projections. And those numbers are used because they're accepted by everybody. So we're not making something new. And then when you've got those numbers broken down by allocation, which is a population version of this, not the housing version of this, then the communities will be able to say, we've got enough, we don't have enough, and we have to move into this. So that's the gross population. Then you have to add this other filter of how do you do that with, what share of the community is at 0 to 30 AMIs and 30 to 50. And that was the allocation here, A or B, and how much of that gets allocated to those communities. On top of that analysis is capital facilities, transportation, urban services, sewer, water. On top of that are special districts and social services, fire districts, school districts, water districts. All of those have to come together to ultimately draw a boundary and say, these parcels of land meet all of these criteria and are therefore eligible to either stay in the UGA or this is a legitimate place to expand a UGA in this case. All of that having been said, we also have in Spokane County somewhere around 1,800 acres of lands that are currently zoned rural or at least non-residential, assigned to most of our small towns, Airway Heights, Medical Lake, Cheney. All of that UGA acreage has to be reassigned. It's been left to idle for years, and that was one of the determining factors that FutureWise and the courts found against the county in 2013, that you had this UGA acreage, but the county kept wanting to add more into the metro core where the development patterns were showing it wanted to grow, but it didn't account for this other acreage. This year, or in 26 rather, we have to account for all of that acreage. So the logical part of this is, let's say, with yet another layer, the cities have added density eligibility to their low density zoning, Boca and other things in the city, notably. So they can they have development regs that can handle a stronger infill than they could in 2015 and 16. So if that means that they can handle their share of population growth and housing growth within that general boundary, then that UGA boundary isn't going to change at all. And we have to find other places that are growing that can't support that. And that could in fact be Airway Heights and Medical Lake, but probably not to the extent of the acreage that's currently tacked onto their communities. And so there's going to be this shuffle. It may be that if the aggregate of this says we need 1,800 acres of new residential land by these standards for density development, all the good standards, multifamily, single family, whatnot, and we've got 1,700 acres parked over here on the sidelines, we have to reassign that 1,700 before we can find another 100. We can't just add 1800 to the metro core. So I don't want to say it's a three-dimensional chess game, but it is certainly multivariate. There's a lot that has to be factored in here.
And it has to be income and all, or I'm assuming all ages and all abilities appropriate, because you just can't park somebody out there in the rural hinterlands that can't afford it.
No, and that's
a little ranchette.
And well, that's been sitting there. These other approaches. I mean, this is what we're looking at on our side now. What could be some of those factors that you would use to weight these decisions rather than just a here's your share, here's your share. And remember, we're not talking about you must build 4,000 units of housing. We're saying you must have zoning regs that allow for this to be built if the market pushes in your direction. And that market could be nonprofits, it could be other things. What are some ways to augment, for example, method A? Do you weight it on transit availability? That's come up many times as planners. If people are in those low income brackets, can we allocate housing in places where they don't have to provide their own transportation, where there's a public transportation system that could get them to needed services as well as day-to-day amenities? That works for the STA routes that we have now, and it can be part of that tradition. It has almost no impact for the county because STA rarely ventures out into the unincorporated UGAs at this point. And yet another element, we are working with the STA to bring their, or at least one part of their planning under the comprehensive plan umbrella. So instead of their transit planning using their traditional methods, which is to essentially expand routes where population is growing at the end of a route. It's like, well, if this has to happen and one of those desirable places is here, but right now that's 4 miles from a transit stop, how do we plan to get transit there in a 5-year period? In other words, it brings them almost into that capital facilities approach of how do you get there over time? And also then provides them a partnership perhaps. Instead of going strictly for federal transit funding, and maybe that, well, okay, maybe there's HUD funding, maybe there's other kinds of funding, congestion mitigation, air quality funding that could be put into that to provide that transit service. So there's a complex implementation side of this too that can come into play. So there's that. The jurisdictional AMIs is another metric that we have data for, and we could use that to break that out. So, and what that ultimately does is it shifts more of this back into the city or into the city of the valley because they already have a higher share of the lower AMI populations. Is that fair and equitable? It kind of depends on what the steering committee wants to do. But the danger in this is if you look at those charts for the county that say 14,000 units, but those units are in unincorporated UGAs, not anywhere near transit, not anywhere near services, not anywhere near a grocery store. How much sense does that make, practically speaking? Whereas if you assigned all of it to the city of Spokane, there's where the transit is, there's where the services are, there's where the grocery stores are. Yet that turns the city of Spokane into the sole provider of space for these units. And that was clearly not the intent of the legislation to move this into a fair share allocation. So it's a huge balancing act.
In a way, I envy your staff with this Gordian knot here, but on the other hand, I don't. Doesn't it become de facto exclusionary zoning if unincorporated county can't figure out how to provide those services that's affordable to all users groups?
At this point, and I don't want to act like an attorney, at this point, probably not, because following the specific legislation that laid out this housing allocation, we are only required to show that we've created development regulations that allow this housing to exist here. What we're struggling with is what you're asking. Well, we can do that, but what about these other 12 layers that we're not really being tasked with by the legislature or GMA at the moment, but make sense to us as professional planners? it's clear that the legislature, in acting like a state planning commission, has taken an interest in this and will probably continue to evolve this. So even though we're trying to solve the Gordian knot today with the knowledge we have today and the requirements we have today, even the next legislative section is probably going to put some new twist on this because it's going to get refined. A lot of people are going to start asking these very same questions. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Planners through our own county group and working multi-county jurisdiction through WASAC and through the APA legislative chapter, we're all looking at this so we can have a voice in that next session more directly from a planning perspective and not just from a legislative perspective. So it's, it's what's the Chinese saying, may you live an interesting life. We have a challenge here. It's a worthy challenge, but right now there are far more questions than definitive answers. And so the idea of, well, if we can put something forth that's defendable right now, we've checked a box. But can we do that, since we're creating a new plan, can we do that in a way that really achieves the results that this county wants to see? And that's those other 12 layers that we've just got to pull together.
What's the runway or the timeline to put a pin in this piece of the process?
June 30th, 2026.
This particular piece is something that won't be decided until the very end, or this is something like a stepping stone that we need to get to move to the next step?
No, Logan, this is a good question, and my answer was superficial. I'm sorry.
Understandable.
It may in fact take an iterative process that takes us well into the first part of 26 until this starts to tighten spiral down to a point. The steering committee will get another briefing at their July meeting. Like I said, we're looking to you for your comment on public policy from a growth perspective today. We will be taking that to the board with this exact slide deck on Monday for a strategic discussion with them. We will take all of that information from the county's perspective back to the steering committee in July with the intention of having some policy direction between the July and September steering committee meetings that can then guide some of the analysis and cranking of the black box so that in a November meeting or maybe a January meeting of the steering committee, there's some tightening of the spiral and say, okay, let's try that.
I'm very thankful that we're getting to this process, but I think we're talking about the easy part. And what I mean by that is I've got a meeting at 12:30 this afternoon with an architect to talk about how do we incorporate architecturally a product that builders can understand and will build. Because I've talked to a lot of builders and they just look at me like, you're nuts. We build houses in a neighborhood for X and we mass produce them and we keep our costs down. And that's what we know. And they know that because that's what we've been doing for 60, 70 years here. So I would suggest that we really get involved in our process, the building community, to try to figure out how, the building and the real estate community, to figure out how we, because the builders that I know want to make a profit so they can stay in business, whatever market they're building in, whether it's starter homes, low-income housing, medium, but how do they do that? And how do we show them the picture that that's a profitable, good way to go? And I just think we've got a lot of work to do, but I think it's well worth the effort.
Mr. Chairman, let me address that specifically because I agree completely. As you know, my background's in architecture and then in planning. And so I am very design focused in terms of building communities, but also this understanding that if you're asking construction trades to build something they don't know how to do, you're kind of running a fool's errand. So there's solutions to that. One is the obvious one that if we were your consulting team and coming in and saying, we've looked at all of the builders, we know what they do, and you're missing a gap, nobody's building this middle housing, this middle thing, you need to look at Denver, you need to look at Minneapolis, you need to look at Boise, you need to look at Colorado Springs and find some developers that know how to do that And then you can do two things. One, you can take the building community to them and say, here, learn how to do that and make a profit because they're doing it. Or you can start inviting them in to be project participants. And that demonstration will also show our local builders, yeah, maybe I can do this. It's been my experience that if you produce clear development regulations that get to permits in a short amount of time and with clarity and definitive action, most builders, architects will react to that and say, I can handle that. It's when there's uncertainty. When it's just say, can you do that thing? And they go, well, that's not what we do. I don't know how to do that. You know, it's frightening because I have to put capital at risk to try that. And I'm not sure I can succeed. If you lay out more of what's a clear path to success and shows like, here, there's a developer that knows how to hit this market and make this happen. So I think it's a solvable problem, but it's also one that can't be, it can't be put into a comprehensive plan. It has to be into, and not even a development regs, it almost has to be a marketing and development strategy to say, here's how we want to find and get this thing built.
Here for middle class, we're built side in.
Right. Totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of feedback, except it doesn't make, I mean, I think that the fair share allocation makes sense to me, I guess, you know, from what I understand. Certainly doesn't seem like the city should take on all of the burden of additional density. It also doesn't seem like the unincorporated county should take on all of the burden of additional density. So yeah, I think it's a balancing act. You know, like I didn't mention it when we were talking about that previous comp plan amendment, but Division Bus Rapid Transit is expected to go clear out into outside of the city limits into North County, and will be pretty accessible from that site, a side point. But you know, there'll be a large piece of unincorporated county that has access to the easiest southbound and northbound bus transit that Spokane's ever had. And so it seems like, you know, while my first thought about density at the Y is like, oh, that's far from the core. In a lot of ways, the development has already happened and we need to densify more at the Y, is my thought process at this point. And so, especially as more services like Division BRT and things like that become available. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Logan, we totally support and welcome that. I mean, given yet another one of the layers back to the climate and resiliency element that we are all working on, reduction of greenhouse gases, reduction of vehicle miles traveled as a goal. Those can't happen with the current urban morphology or the current patterns that we have and that we've built. We have to build what we used to call a polycentric area. So instead of just a downtown with increasing or decreasingly dense suburbs coming out from it, we need to create centers. We need to create more urban places where people don't always have to leave and go somewhere else just to get milk or groceries. And so one of the things we're now challenging STA about in the North Division project is, you know, we've seen some of their work. Joshua Warwick, one of our staff, has been attending their meetings and did a great analysis. But it's all about improving the quality of the route. It's about complete streets. It's about having safe crossings to get back and forth. They're not talking about building an urban core that becomes a destination for transit unto itself, an employment core, a commercial core in these emerging areas. And so the North Metro is a great candidate for that on both Division and Newport Highway, particularly the North Mead area that has been urbanizing for 40 years, but is outside of a UGA. You know, we're working with Commerce to figure out how we put that in a UGA adequately so that it can be an urban place that has destinations for transit riders as well as just a bus stop to get on to come down to the plaza. So that polycentric model is very much one of the scenarios, talk about in a minute, that we're going to be putting forward for your consideration and for others. Now, having said that, you brought up the fair share housing, and you know, you're just a young punk. So in the 70s, those of us that have a little more white hair remember the first round of fair share housing when it came up in the 70s in urban renewal. And it turned out to be a horrible experiment. It led to, the Robert Taylor homes in Chicago, Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, Cabrini Green in Chicago, these absolute horrible places to grow up. And so that fair share language has just emotionally charged baggage for those of us that have been in planning a long time. And so I wish that wasn't there, because what we're trying to do is in fact a more equitable distribution, but it has some old baggage attached to it. So, and I meant that at least in a humorous way. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, I got the same thing. I was like, oh, fair share. Okay.
Yeah.
But I was just young Conklin too. So. I appreciate the fact that my colleagues here, this is not your first rodeo. So you're getting to see what it looks like to do this again and hearing some of the same conversations and going, okay, so what happened in the last 30 years since, well, longer than that now, gosh, since growth management. I would say, or I would argue, I guess, that preventing competition is not an actionable complaint. We have to change. Times have changed. The business models have changed. It does matter that your planners are going to these conferences and talking to builders. And it is important that builders in Spokane learn how to do it and make it affordable. And it is important that STA figures out it's not just BRT, bus rapid transit. It's also about, hey, my mom's 85 and she can't drive anymore. She needs to be able to get on a bus and get to daily goods and services. And she lives out in the county and she wants to stay there. So how do we make that happen for school children and everybody, all users? That's really what you're being charged with. And you're right. Maybe the legislature said, this is what's in black and white, and this is what was codified. But you've got all those other layers and they have to last for decades. So I appreciate the challenges that you have in front of you. And I also think that it's great that you're coming to grips with it. I've lived here my entire life, and Spokane County is not what it was in 1960. And it will never be again, much as some people want to say, I don't want to see it change. It is. And if we want our children to live here or come back here and our grandchildren, it's going to be your planning staff that makes that happen. And the way the code gets written and it gets carried out and enforced. So thank you very much for all of your work.
You're welcome. That's only the beginning. We're not even, we're like at the very start of the beginning. Other thoughts? And as we noted, this will be back as one of these ongoing workshops as we start to build in your agendas for the rest of the year.
Does anybody here or online have any questions in the workshop? There's also this matter of Spokane County visioning. Is that kind of a separate item?
It is. It won't take very long.
Okay. Oh, good. Paul? Open him up.
Good morning, commissioners. I just wanted to comment that or compliment county staff because they're way ahead in briefing the planning commission about these matters than is the city. The city's folks aren't telling their plan commission anything about this kind of material right now. And so I'm excited that the county's leading the pack.
Thanks for that, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Anyone else?
And Paul hasn't missed a planning meeting in like a decade, so that's probably on pretty good authority, I figure.
More than a decade.
I met Paul early in my career across the river, and I value his insight and diligence and expertise.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, no further comments from the commission. Next topic.
Mr. Chairman, we will make this brief. It's sort of an intro. You've heard a little bit about this before, and in our sort of monologue on housing, you heard part of it in terms of those various layers. But generally speaking, we're going to be using a visioning and scenario building approach to synthesize all of these pieces. And what that means is in the visioning approach, where we look at what are the foundations, what's out there, what are the various uses that are in place. In other words, what's our inventory, including what we call place-based assets. And those are things that would exist in places that you can build both an economic and community development strategy around, which is generally about place making, which is part of visioning. And place making comes to fore through creating scenarios. Many of you are probably used to or at least seen this in transportation planning or complete streets planning, where, for example, the North Division corridor has laid out 4 or 5 street sections. Here's a scenario: 3 lanes in each direction with nothing but transit. Here's a second scenario: 2 lanes in each direction with wider shoulders for bike lanes. Here's a third scenario: 1 lane of traffic, 1 lane of dedicated transit, a concrete wall separated bike lane and sidewalk on the side. Those are all scenarios that are being put forth for comment. We will be doing that in a placemaking aspect of, here's what a place looks like, here's what a neighborhood looks like, and what that will lead to is, as you react to those, as the community reacts to those, public policy will help us shape what do those look like, and now we can start writing development regulations to implement them, to make those happen, which is back to our comment about if you provide clear directions to the development community, they've got a path to follow to get a permit, to get something built and make a profit. So we will be using that approach as our overall method to combine all of this very specific work we're doing on each of these growth management elements, from housing, transportation, CFP, parks, rural, and open space, and bringing that together in these various scenarios. And there's not going to be 1 or 2, there might be 10 that fit different places. One of those scenarios, or all of those scenarios, still have to consider a healthy and vibrant downtown Spokane. The county has all too often sort of drawn the county planning map like this with these big holes in the middle of it. It's like, well, we don't have to worry about that, and we don't have to worry about that. We do have to worry about that. And we're working with our colleagues at city planning, both at, well, all of them through the PTAC, but to also try to make that sort of a ongoing planning studio beyond just the steering committee mission and steering committee mandates. Technically, the things we bring to the steering committee relate almost exclusively to the urban growth area. But having that steering committee serve as an elected evaluating body for this polycentric model shows how Spangle fits into the Cheney model, fits into the South Spokane model, and how these things can all work together to provide different kinds of scenarios, different kinds of quality of life for people that want to move or stay in Spokane County. In economic development, the biggest strategy you start with is keep what you have before you go start looking for other things. Well, we want to preserve the people that want to stay in the county, and especially the younger folks that grow up, go to schools in our university district. There should be opportunities for them to start businesses, to work in businesses here, rather than to say, I've got this great degree, I have to go to Seattle. Got this great degree, I've got to go to Denver. We don't want to lose that over time, because that's a fatal flaw for the entire county. So this is an approach to, again, back to a design background, it's an approach to illustrate and show what these things look like, so you and others can say, I like that, or I don't like this, or here, what about these things? It's much different than laying out 10 pages of policy language that say, here's 12 goals and 53 policies. What do you think? It's like, well, here's what they look like. This is what happened. This is what happens if you use these things. And so I found that to be a very helpful tool in my career. And I think it'll be a really useful thing for us, our communities, the technical groups that are going to be volunteering to help on these elements. And it'll be essentially building this version of the future that leads us into a 5, a 10, a 20-year and longer horizon, because it'll set It's settle tone, and then those development regs will be flexible enough to adapt to the market over time instead of where we are today, which is a very rigid comprehensive plan that has zoning attached to it almost in a concurrent fashion, which means every possible change has to go through this extensive amendment process, including the concurrency analysis and the cumulative impacts. If we know we're trying to build this thing, then there are many ways to get there, and the regs should provide the flexibility for the market to react and do that within these parameters, including all of those layers we talked about. So we're adding this, visioning and scenario building aspect to our program as kind of the fundamental way we're going to talk about this going forward. And with that, I will take any questions, and I will also quit talking for the day.
Mr. Chesney, at one point early on, before we even got to this far in the discussion, which you're right, it's early times, and a lot of work gets done in early times. You mentioned possibly having a studio set up that Planning Commission would go to, as well as staff. I don't know where that's at, if you have that space.
It's about 50 feet down the hallway.
Do I hear that happening?
Yeah, we had an opportunity present itself almost a year ago as we were reorganizing the administrative side of building and planning. One of the former building directors embraced a remote work strategy in a significant way. That has changed a little bit over time, but one of the things that did go remote were our inspectors. Building inspectors. They are in the field, even prior to that, they're in the field every day from 8 o'clock on, and they convened in a room down here from 7:30 to 8 to, gather their thoughts, to talk among each other, and then they split out. So there was a space over here that was used half hour a day, 5 days a week, and then empty. What we did is when the inspectors went remote, we adapted that space to become a planning studio. And so now it has whiteboard on all of the walls surrounding it. It's got an electronic board where we can interact on Zoom and video and do these things. And it's a place where the planners, put it delicately, not like a conference room, we don't have to clean up when we're done at the end of the day because somebody else is going to use the conference room in 2 hours. It can just exist with maps and sketches and stuff up on the walls. Those are places, again, I found very useful in my career for continuing to stimulate thoughts and others. Our group has held PTAC and subcommittee meetings in there already. So we've invited planners from around our county to sit in there, and there are drawing tables as well as the walls. So it's meant to be a creative space. It's a very casual space. We've spent, to the direction of our CEO, we spent very little money producing it, put up some whiteboard, and that was about it. So we've made it a very economical space for the county to work on this plan for the next 2.5 years, and then to be that ongoing place where we're testing the development regs and we're looking at new thoughts and looking toward 2031. Will we hold formal sessions in there? Maybe we can. But when we want to talk to you about things that are going to be, on a wall that we don't want to use a single screen on because we also want our public to participate, we can use that space. So it's up and running. And you're welcome to take a look when we're done today.
I'd forgotten that, Melissa. Thank you for bringing that forward. Yes.
It's a huge advantage for this kind of planning because this is so intense and because it's so collaborative. You can't do it by just assigning it to a planner and say, go sit at your desk and produce this thing and bring it back to me. It's like, no, we have to. And along that line, every Thursday afternoon, we have a planning studio. The entire long-range staff gathers all afternoon to go over everything they've learned for the week, present part of their elements. What does this mean? How are we putting this together? So it's an active room for our weekly use as well as other aspects.
Other comments for Mr. Chesney? Thank you. Staff report is next.
What?
What's what it says? Staff report.
I think you've heard where the staff has been going lately.
You've done a yeoman's job.
what do we have coming up? We have the zoning text amendments will be starting back for your consideration. Next meeting, we will be bringing back the rural traditional weddings and events language for a public hearing. And that public hearing may only open unless, unless it's something that everybody is comfortable with. We may open it next time and keep it open into July.
Yep.
We will be bringing back, well, the gun club is up for the small scale meat processing. ZTA will be coming back. The temporary use for residential structures in the burn area, all of those will be coming back in the next couple of meetings for you. And then further down the road, you'll be seeing the comp plan amendments cycle back through for your consideration and approval. In between, we will be adding more and more flesh to the skeleton of comprehensive planning and bringing that to you for comments and observations. And one thing we will also do next time is we will bring you a summary of the kickoff meetings. The guys, including Tate Bongo here, have been out in 7 or will be 7 meetings. There's one more to go to introduce what is the plan, how do you get involved, what are the things we're trying to do. I think they shared that slide deck with you in my absence at a meeting, and we'll give you a summary of what we've heard from the community in the early, very early census, and kind of what we've learned in that first go around, and what's next in building this visioning and scenario building pattern of work. So there's quite a lot, and we will try to keep July not terribly intense because we know there'll be vacations too. So we have a busy year ahead of us.
Thank you for your leadership and your excellent team. Next order of business. Before we do the approval, well, let's do the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve here.
I reviewed them. I reviewed
the 30th. Let's do 16th.
I reviewed the May 16th minutes and I was here for the whole meeting and they look accurate to me. Moved to approve them.
For both of them?
No, just the 16th because I
May
wasn't
the
here for the
16th?
30th till
there.
then.
All right. Second by Melissa. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Without exception. Those minutes are hereby adopted. May the 30th minutes.
Move to adopt.
By Pete, second. We'll do by Clyde Hosey. All those in favor of adopting the minutes of May the 30th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
I'll
So ordered, adopted.
I'll abstain.
You abstained?
Yeah,
Okay,
just because I missed the first half. So
well, you were online, weren't you?
yeah, but not till 10:20. So let's
For the
be
record,
careful.
Logan
For the
will
record, abstained.
Before, well, in our next meetings are June the 27th and July the 11th, according to the publication here. But before I call for adjournment, would anyone like to make any comments, as we typically, sometimes people want to pipe up? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do we, as planning commission members, how do we as a planning commission deal with nearby landowners who want to get into the UGA and not create conflicts of interest and be able to disseminate information fairly and accurately? Because all of us are up here because we know people and we're interested in our community and being involved. And I happen to live on 2 borders. I got a lot of neighbors and I can just see, but I mean, just how do we respond to those people?
Sure. Let me address that specifically and then add something following. The most appropriate, very specific thing to do if anybody approaches you about being interested in inclusion in the UGA is have them send a letter of interest to my attention with their parcel information and a map, and we will put it in the file for future analysis. By the terms of the settlement agreement from 2016, we are not allowed to accept applications for UGA expansion, and frankly, we shouldn't anyway. So we have no formal process. It's not like sending a CPA in and you pay a fee and you get into the thing. It's like, but we recognize that people are anxious. And so we have been telling people for 2 years, just send a letter of interest. We will put it in the file. And when the analysis really gets going for the UGA, when it comes down to those various layers, if this parcel and this parcel are in the path of development, but that one is already at the point of capital facilities, it has urban services, it's got transportation, and this one doesn't, that will have an advantage from the analytical perspective of coming in because we know a developer is ready to use it. And the point of the urban growth areas is to bring in lands that are in fact ready for development. Absent that's why we have the urban reserve side. So, well, I'm thinking, but I'm not there yet. Well, then go sit on the shelf for a while. So just have them send a simple letter of interest to my attention and include a map. Okay. The second part, and this is on me. We talked last time about providing all of you with some talking points about where we are. We haven't done that yet. I have a draft of that from my staff on my screen upstairs, and I haven't gone through to kind of finalize that. We will be doing that and provide that to you. Ideally, we'll provide some summary of that in addition to minutes, but here are the points we tried to cover. Here are some things that you may get asked from the dozens or thousands of people in our audience that will come to you later and ask a question. So we will be giving you those summary points that hopefully will address some of the questions you may get from the public. And of course, the obvious one, if you get something that's totally left field, send them to us.
Motion to adjourn. All right.